Super. Okay, I'd like to introduce Attia. He's the CEO of Bionic Vision Technologies, an Australian company. You'll notice we put him on originally last because he's a few hours, well, he's many hours ahead of us, but he's actually behind us, but one day ahead of us because he's in Australia. But he's going to talk about functional vision for the blind and update us on some of the activities, exciting activities at Bionic Vision. Ash, go ahead.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the organizer for inviting me to present Bionic Vision Technologies. Thank you very much. Can you hear me all okay?
Can everyone hear? Yes. Okay. Yeah, we're good, Ash.
And can you see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So first of all, a very quick introduction. Myself as a CEO, and the rest of the senior executive team is Brian Gordon, who's the Chief Technology Officer, and Adrian also is the Chief Operating Officer. Now, Bionic Vision Technology is really a technology company that has an innovation platform. We started our roots in the surgical space with an implantable system called the Bionic Eye system, which I will, of course, explain as we go forward. And now we have another product that's a consumer product, non-implantable. It's a sensory substitution product for blind patients. So let's first start with the Bionic Eye, what it's all about. Well, Bionic Eye first is addressing a huge problem. That problem called retinitis pigmentosa. In very simple terms, it's a genetic disease that affects the photoreceptors in the back of the retina that basically turns light into vision. And when that genetic disease or these genes affect those photoreceptors, patients basically will ultimately all go blind, completely blind. It is the #1 cause of visual loss for working age people today. If you walk down the street and see someone with a white cane or a dog, a seeing eye dog, it is very likely that they have retinitis pigmentosa. It affects really a huge number of people, millions of people around the world. And that's really what our Bionic Eye is addressing, the late stage of that genetic disease, where patients basically have lost entirely their vision. Nothing available today on the market that can address this problem, nothing. Gene therapy, it's still in the very early stages because there is more than 250 plus individual genes that are responsible for this disease. And the best that there is now is one company that's addressing one gene, which is about just less than 1% of these patients. Again, stem cell therapy is still very much in its initial stages. Optogenetics is quite exciting developments, but it's very early yet in development. And visual aids, of course, that would not be helpful for people that has this retinitis pigmentosa. It certainly makes minimal impacts on their lives. They are for people who have some sort of vision. How does this Bionic Eye work? It's very simple. It consists of 3 main components: an implant, which goes behind the retina, a microprocessor and pair of glasses, very cool pair of glasses that have got cameras, etc. And how it works is rather simple, I hope to explain. The pair of glasses with all the cameras embedded inside it, an infrared looks at the scenery, captures all that information, sends it to this cool processing unit. The processing unit talks to the implant and makes the implant basically stimulates the back of the retina and hence interprets for the patients and with the patients visual information that enables the patient to really interpret and know what it is that they're looking at. It's the very first in the world that goes into a very safe space, and the surgery is safe. effective. There has been no adverse events due to that implantation of the system. Now we are well beyond the 2+ years from our latest clinical trial. And the patient can do a lot of things with this. And if need be, the hardware can be upgraded if necessary without causing any damage to the retina. We have just published our 2+ years clinical studies. And although there are many results that have been published, the two most important ones, which everybody looks at, is how well does the patient do in terms of detection of certain things like windows and doors, and how often can they avoid obstacles. And it's a very clear significant improvement, of course, between when the device is off and when the device is on. When the device is on, it gives you the percentage that the patient is able to avoid obstacle and detect windows. Now, patients tell us that they can do a lot of things, and this also has been published. Not only very significant things emotionally in terms of their confidence and sense of belonging, but they can do things like recognize their loved ones for the first time after being blinded by this terrible disease for 20+ years. They can recognize street signs and traffic lights. They can do things like you and I take for granted, like sort out their washing, or go next door to their neighbors, or sit in a cafe and recognize what's in front of them, a plate or a fork, or sit on a chair where it's actually empty rather than sitting on someone. It's really remarkable what we hear patients tell us. We are now ready to go into a clinical trial in the United States with quite a number of enhancements. And we have partners with Neurotech Medical, who are going to be our manufacturing partner in the United States. And they have actually very recently have taken a strategic equity into Bionic Vision Technologies, which we are very happy with. They are a company very well established in the space of neurostimulation, etc. We are hoping to have a generation 3 entering into the trial, and we know that the enhancements already that have been done with a thinner implant, artificial intelligence, and very easy to perform upgrades. We have a very clear development and commercialization plan, and we've just put in an application for a breakthrough to the FDA. The other product that I've mentioned, which really stemmed out of the almost the world-class software that we use for the Bionic Eye, is something that is called a sensory substitution. We are calling it Vibrocite internally. And what it is basically, it uses almost the same components as the Bionic Eye, with the exception of the surgical implant. Instead of that, we have a pad that is basically worn via a very lightweight brace on the back of the patients. This now serves a much bigger population, those white cane users and mainly blind patients. And it gives them, and it vibrates. It gets more vibration as you come closer to something. And of course, it also gives a sense of direction, whether it's on your right, top, bottom, left, center, etc. With this, we know that those patients can do lots of things and navigate and avoid obstacles, and even recognize, somebody talking to them and exactly in what direction and whether they've moved left or right. It can do a lot of very cool things. Although the space of sensory substitution or vision aids is crowded, we believe with Vibrocite that we have quite a lot of uniqueness that none of the existing sensory substitution products really offer patients. And we're very excited about this because it is a product that is, as I mentioned, non-implantable. It can go on the market much quicker and generate revenue sooner. And again, we have a very clear development plan for this. It's a class 1 product, and therefore all it requires is internal certification rather than any of regulatory approval by FDA or European regulatory. We obviously don't do this alone. We work with the who's of the blindness and retinal surgery and retinitis pigmentosa and genetic diseases for the eyes in the world. We have a very strong medical advisory board from the United States, Europe, and Australia. The market opportunity is really quite huge for both of these products. The non-implantable product, the Vibrocite, is about a 1.2 billion just for the white cane users. And then additional indications for just legally blind population, that's about a $14 billion opportunity. Now for the bionic eye, the very late stage is about a $3.5 billion market. And those are very late stage, as I mentioned, retinitis pigmentosa, they completely lost all their vision. We are, of course, will be working on additional indications and earlier stages of this genetic disease, which expands that market opportunity to about 26 billion. We are in the middle of a capital raise, and right now we are looking for 13 million to basically get us ready and manufacture the products that we will enter the IDE in the United States and the trial in Europe and in Australia, and really commercialize completely the Vibrocite, the sensory substitution, and launch it and start to generate revenue. In 12 months, roughly, we are planning to go to an IPO. That is an initial public offering listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. So in summary, really, we have a very, a groundbreaking technology that is clinically validated, very safe and effective, a very clear strategy in place, addressing huge problems that nobody has addressed so far, and that is, and with a very significant market opportunity. And the introduction I gave initially about our senior management team, they are very experienced when it comes to this space and the space of neurotechnology and neurostimulation. And I thank you so much for your attention and any questions.
Okay. Ash, thank you very much for that presentation and update. I have a question or two, but first let's find out, do we have anyone from our Zoom audience who's raised their hand? No. Okay, so Ash, I'm very interested in this Vibrocite technology, and part of the reason I'm interested is because I want to explore the commonality in enhancement of perceived visual input between your bionic eye product and your Vibrocite product. So often, those of us who are used to cell phones and computers, think of a direct relationship between the number of pixels and the video quality, the visual quality of an image, right? I think we can all remember the first PCs that had CGA resolution, whatever it was, 320 by 200, and then it became VGA, which was 640, and then we went to XVGA, and now you've got almost unlimited resolution. So we're trained to think of that relationship, but in fact, the number of electrodes that you have in a BE3 system, or the number of tactile actuators you have in your Vibrocite product, it's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship between the number of sensors and the perceived visual quality. So I'm just curious if you can comment on the commonality. To what extent is there overlap in your image processing software and technology between the two devices?
Oh, thank you very much. Excellent question. and a question that a lot of people who are not very much embedded into the science struggle with. It's not a one-to-one relationship. When you look at Vibrocite, for example, there's about 100 actuation on the back, but that's because it's not giving any visual perception. But the vision processing, of course, will couple some of these actuators and will have them vibrate in a certain way and in a certain direction, so as to give the patient, for example, are we looking at an obstacle that's up the top or down the bottom or towards the center? Are we getting closer, and how much closer we are getting? And we have something no one has called the depth algorithm that really is able to identify something that is that does not need any contrast, for example. And therefore, for Vibrocite, yes, you could argue the more electrodes on the back, the better. But in actual reality, there is a limit beyond which you don't get any benefit. The benefit you get is from the firing and the vibration of the electrode. Very similar now when you look at the Bionic eye, except now when you look at the Bionic eye, you are looking into stimulation of the retinal cells and photoreceptors. And clearly, the more isn't better. In fact, sometimes more causes a heck of a lot of confusion because you are now stimulating photoreceptors. The trick is the vision processing, and again, the direction and the wavelength upon which you are stimulating the back of the retina. So if you are very specific and you have a world-class vision processing that stimulates the back of the retina in a certain way, you can get a very good visual perception of what you are looking at. Where if you go more, you see pretty much nothing. And of course, on the other hand, if you go much, much less, you also perceive very little. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. My other question has to do, you mentioned you foresee an IPO on the ASX exchange coming up. Does the addition of the Vibrocite product, does that mesh well with your intentions? Do you think that potential investors will see this as a nearer term revenue stream, or is that totally unrelated?
No, you precisely hit the nail on the head, I should say, or hit the point. That is exactly now what our investor is looking at, is that this is a product that is for visually impaired, non-implantable. It can generate revenue in about a year and a half, and hence makes the company very well suited to enter an IPO with revenue being generated, something that will serve a much larger group of patients, but of course at a much lesser price, and then be able to get the Bionic eye on the market, which of course for a class 3 implantable, serving of course different groups of patients entirely, will then generate revenue somewhere around middle of calendar year 2025. So now looking at a product that takes some of the risks from the revenue generation that could be on the market by calendar year 23, early calendar year 23, and going into then the faster development and commercialization of the Bionic eye. So yes, investors do see it very much linked, and they like a two-product company, and particularly with one that is a lot less risk, of course, than an implantable surgical product.
Okay, thank you, Ash. Is there anyone else who has a question for Ash, either in the room or in the Zoom universe? All right, well, if not, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you very much.